Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Anthony Moreno. On the program today, we sit down with the producer of the movie The Popes Exorcist from Sony Pictures Entertainment. Patrick Kaczmarek joins us now to share more about the movie, his career, and upbringing in Las Cruces. Michael, welcome back to KRWG Public Media.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's always a pleasure being here, and it's great to see you again, as always.
Well, some folks may not know that you actually used to work here at KRWG Public Media, so a big welcome back. It's really nice to see folks move on and to have success, especially in this growing industry in film here that we have in our area. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about that, but first I want to hear about your upbringing in Las Cruces. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. My parents, they moved here they were both from two different suburbs outside of Pittsburgh, and they raised me and my siblings here. And I attended Immaculate Heart of Mary Catholic School from kindergarten through 8th grade. And that's really where I got a real good foundation. I mean, obviously my parents were instilling the faith in me as well, but got a really good foundation in the Catholic faith through Immaculate Heart of Mary. It's now, it's formerly known as Immaculate Heart of Mary Catholic School, but now it's Las Cruces Catholic School. And it was just really just a wonderful place to learn that, like, God is love was pretty much what they were preaching in the 80s and the early 90s there at Immaculate Heart of Mary. And then I graduated in 95 from IHM, and then I went to Oñate High School, which is another school that changed names, so it's now known as Oregon Mountain High, as I'm sure you know. And then I was there and graduated in 1999, and I got to say, I was talking to the Sun News this morning, and I had to mention that, in terms of growing up here and all the wonderful educators that I had the pleasure of interacting with, I have to say that I had a teacher named Mr. Raymond Castellani in the 8th grade here at IHM, and he was really amazing in that he was an engineer who had moved here, wanted to give back, and really always encouraged people to leave Las Cruces and do something amazing, and then come back and give back to the community with that experience. And then also at Oñate, I had a really influential teacher, an English teacher. She taught AP English, named Miss Rosemary Kirby. She actually got Teacher of the Year, I think, a couple times in New Mexico, and she was always really big in telling me to go and pursue my dreams in Hollywood and in LA. And so I can't thank them enough for just inspiring me and telling me to think and dream big was really what came across from them.
Do you remember how old you were when you realized that this is my passion, this is what I want to pursue?
Yeah, I always loved film, and especially horror movies as a kid. So I grew up watching, the Freddy and Jason movies, and Halloween and all that kind of stuff, and just you really fell in love with the genre. And my dad's a big movie buff too, so it's just like he was always playing movies, and it was just always a big part of my life. But I don't think it was until, and that's why I bring up Miss Kirby, because it wasn't until I was like in high school, and you got to figure out where you're going to go to college, and what are you going to major in, what are you going to do with your life. And I always kind of thought I'd be a lawyer because I've got kind of that analytical personality, and people always told me that I'd probably make a good lawyer, even like in elementary school growing up, like, oh, this kid's going to be a lawyer or something. So I sort of always had that in my head. But when I took Miss Kirby's class and started thinking about my future, and especially with people encouraging me, saying like, hey, maybe you could do something different than being a lawyer. Maybe there's something bigger. What is your real passion? What's your dream? And I don't know how many people really sit there and analyze and think about that. When I came out of that conversation, I said, I want to go make movies. I'm going to be a movie producer. And I remember sitting my parents down and telling them, I'm going to move to LA and I'm going to go make movies. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think I can do it. I'm just going to believe in myself.
That really says something about the power of educators and the impact they could have on someone's life. I mean, you really talked about that already. What are your thoughts on that when you talk with folks about this industry, especially the future generations?
Well, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I actually taught a producing class here at NMSU at CMI, and so that was one of my greatest experiences ever, because I really love working, with youth and inspiring people the same way that I was inspired by Ms. Kirby and Mr. Castellani. And so just to be able to bring that wealth of experience from LA back here and encourage people and you know, teach them things that they haven't learned about before about the industry. It's just been, it's a passion of mine to help impart some of this knowledge and experience that I've gained with the younger generation.
People talk about how tough it may be to break into the industry. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure, it is extremely difficult, and as a man of prayer, I can say the only way that it happened for me was praying, and specifically praying the rosary. So, and also that's another thing I have to give props to Ms. Kirby and to Immaculate Heart of Mary for, because they both the school and Ms. Kirby were really influential in sort of guiding my prayer life and encouraging the rosary and the daily rosary. So I will say when I was at, so I ultimately transferred from, I went to UNM for a year, then I went to NMSU for a year, and I did a student exchange program called the National Student Exchange, NSE, and that's what got me to Cal State LA, which is where I ultimately graduated with a BA in communications, majoring in film, TV, and radio. And you know, in graduating when I graduated from Cal State LA, it was kind of the same thing when I was leaving Oñate, of like, what are you going to do with your life, and what do you really want to do, and trying to focus on my passion and you know, give it some sort of direction. So I ultimately went to major in film, but like you said, it's hard to, how do you actually get your foot in the door? So when I was right around the time I was graduating from Cal State LA, I would wake up every morning and I'd say a decade of the rosary, and I would pray to God and I'd say, God, I really want to work for New Line Cinema at the time. And because they were the company that had produced the Freddy Krueger movies, and then they also had gotten the rights to Jason Voorhees at the time, and they were just doing Freddy versus Jason. It was just about to release. So every morning I would get up and I'd get on my knees and I'd pray for about 5-10 minutes, and I'd just say, God, please help me open this door for me, get me in this place. And so ultimately the way that I did it, and what I always tell my students too, is internships. I can't talk internships up enough, especially in the entertainment industry, because although it's tough to get your foot in the door as say a paid employee doing something, or as a screenwriter, or as a producer, there's lots of people in Hollywood that are looking for free labor. And so if you're an intern and you're willing to offer your services and come in a couple days a week, get some school credit or whatever it might be for exchange, you'd be surprised at how many of these major companies have huge internship programs, and that's usually the foot in the door for most people. So I prayed and prayed and prayed, and it took a couple months, and eventually I finally got that call from New Line, and they said, hey, if you want an internship, come on down on Monday. We'd love to have you start.
Wow. Now that's amazing, just how your perseverance seems to pay off. But I think, you know, there's also something said about, from what I've heard from other folks in the industry, is networking and just how important it is with the industry when you do get those doors that finally open to you. Has that been your experience, or can you share anything about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, there's a phrase out there that, you know, companies don't do business with companies, don't do business with other companies. It's people doing business with people. And so once you get into the movie studio, you realize you know it's a network of all these people, and definitely, you know, you have to. It's more important the people that you meet, hanging out with them, the conversations that you have, and relating to people and finding genuine people that you connect with, than it is even the work that you're doing every day, because it's the people and those connections that are going to end up taking you to other places, other opportunities opening up. Like for instance, even just to get into New Line, I couldn't get in there, the door wouldn't open, so I found a company they did business with. They had a first look deal with a company called Benner Spink. So I went to go intern for them. They were a smaller company. Got it. I made it where, you know, all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, we love Michael. Michael, what would you love? I'd love to get an internship with New Line, and you guys know people at New Line. So it's really about making those connections, and I can't say enough that like personality and perseverance is it's probably both. Like half of it's perseverance, the other half is personality and trying to make those connections. I mean, even one of the guys that that I worked with when I was at New Line, he's also one of the producers on the Popes Exorcist. You know, we're still working together and hanging out 20 years later. Wow.
Speaking of the Popes Exorcist, let's talk about the movie a little bit. Can you give us a little bit of a backstory about the movie and what it's about?
Sure. So the movie's basically, it highlights the life of Father Gabriel Amorth, who was the chief exorcist for the Vatican for over 30 years. And he was there from, I guess, 86 till about 2016. He died at the age of 91. God rest his soul. And so the movie follows Father Amorth as he gets assigned by the Pope, his boss, to a case in Spain where a young boy's been possessed. But this isn't just any demon. This demon has a history, and it's got sort of a conspiracy behind it, and sort of a larger plot and sort of motivation and goal in terms of what the demon's trying to do with this family and with Father Amorth. And so Father Amorth is sent there by the Vatican to sort of figure out what is this conspiracy, who is this demon, what's he trying to do, and then ultimately to try to heal the boy and heal the family.
Father Amorth is played by Russell Crowe, a big Hollywood actor, superstar movie actor, and award-winning actor. How was it, landing somebody like that for this film, and how did you approach him?
Oh, it was Russell Crowe was such a godsend. I can't thank, God enough for sending us Russell, because he was great. He's so great in the role. He brings so much of Father Amorth's personality to the role, which is amazing. His sense of humor, I think, is what really comes across in the film in terms of the way that he deals with demons and not doing it too seriously, not taking himself too seriously. And so Russell's been great. I mean, he, like you said, A-list actor, action star. I mean, we couldn't have gotten a better person to bring Father Amorth to life on the screen. And when we went out to Russell for the role, I guess what he's mentioned is that he didn't realize that the chief exorcist for the Vatican was like an actual position or even a real job. So I guess when he was reading the script, he thought that it might not even be real. So he started looking Father Amorth up, and as he started learning more about him and realized that it was a real person, he'd written all these books, he just became in love with the guy. And he did so much research to try to get, like I said, to get his personality come across correctly in the movie. And we set up meetings with him with some of the people that used to live and work with Father Amorth in Rome. And so it just was, he was the perfect guy to come into the role and just really knock it out.
Well, this movie has done pretty well at the box office so far. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah, we thankfully are right around, I think, 61 or 62 million as of today with the international and domestic totals together. And so, and on a production budget of, there's been a couple articles out there that says the budget was like around anywhere from like 17 to 18 million. So if you do the math on that between the budget and what we're doing now in terms of overseas and domestic, it's, I couldn't be more thrilled in terms of the box office success. And we've got a lot of really great reviews too. Audiences are just really responding to it, critics as well. And now the movie's available as of this week on, you can get it on video on demand, so you could rent it, you can buy it. It's still in theaters as well, so there's plenty of ways for people to see it and enjoy it.
Now you mentioned video on demand and streaming, of course, available within the industry. How much has that changed your position when you're planning for a movie?
Well, it's definitely made it a lot harder for producers to get movies made. I mean, on one hand, you have all these other, you have all these additional companies out there in streaming services that are producing content. So they're producing, on one hand, they're producing more content than they've ever done before. But on the other hand, it's that much more difficult to get a movie produced in theaters today, because that's basically the conversation in Hollywood when you go into these meetings is, okay, this is a great idea, but what differentiates it from being a straight to streaming movie that you would actually then put out in the movie theater and put the the marketing and budget behind it and that type of support. So it's a lot harder to get studios to commit to a project and release it in theaters. And they really have to believe in it. There's a lot of movies that a lot of times they maybe have that intention for, and then after the movie's done, they make the decision, what, we're not going to spend the money to, market this worldwide. We're just going to dump it on, whatever streaming service it might be. So I couldn't have been more thrilled that we partnered with Sony, because Sony is one of the only major studios that does not have their own streaming service. So it's great that they're committed wholeheartedly to the theatrical model, and I couldn't be happier, being a partner with them in bringing this project to life to the big screen.
I was able to catch this movie, and one thing I did find interesting was how the movie also showed a little bit about church politics. And can you share a little bit of insight into that? And is that something you've been interested in keeping up on? Sure.
Well, and actually, if you read Father Amorth's memoirs, those scenes are sort of inspired by different things that he's mentioned in there. In that, he was always he was always very respectful of the church and his superiors. But I think he was a little bit of we've always pitched him as like the James Bond of exorcists, you know what I mean? That he's just kind of he's this interesting character who was very in your face about the reality of the devil and the need for exorcism in the ministry. And so within the church, and like you mentioned about the church politics, it's interesting because today there's a lot of people within the church that, want to shy away from talking about exorcism or about the devil. And so I think that Amorth oftentimes ended up getting into conversations or getting into hot water here and there because of things. I mean, he also was a prolific journalist, and he, was part of Radio Maria there in Italy, one of the biggest, religious radio stations. And so he was always putting himself out there in the media about the ministry that he's doing. And I think that probably, I'm sure, upset a few people in the church that, view things differently.
Speaking of response from the church, did you actually hear anything from the Vatican about the film?
Well, yes, actually, I mean, we've been in contact with them, with the Vatican. It's interesting when you say the Vatican because, technically it's a city, right? It's or a city-state, and so there's lots of different people at the Vatican that we're in communications with. But on this project in particular, there's a religious order that Father Amorth belonged to, and so it was his order that we actually were able to do the deal with to get we did the deal with Father Amorth initially, but he ended up passing away as we were sort of negotiating the rights for the film and television, or the film and television rights to his 2 memoirs. And so during that process, when he passed away, I then ended up working with his religious order. So then those priests actually were the ones that, like I said, we brought Russell Crowe out so he could meet with them and get to learn a little bit more about the man and his ministry. And I have to say, like, I'm really thrilled that they were definitely more than okay with the movie after it was finally put together. They're very thrilled with Russell Crowe's performance in terms of portraying the man and some of his real attributes. So for me that was important because I wanted to make sure that his order that we did this deal with that kind of succeeded Father Amorth after he passed away, that they were pleased and happy with it. So, and we did try to actually organize a screening for the Vatican in advance before, but the movie came out the week of Easter, and that's like the busiest time for the priests at the Vatican. So it really was sort of a scheduling thing where we weren't able to make it happen for the people that they wanted to see it. But we've gotten really great reviews from some of the most conservative Catholic newspapers in the U.S. The National Catholic Register gave us a favorable review. So to me, I think that I think we've done really good in terms of trying to portray the church in a good light. Father Amorth treating him with respect and dignity, and it seems like most people are pleased.
Yeah, you talked about your faith quite a bit here in this interview. I mean, how much of it played a role for you pursuing this project?
Oh, 150%. I mean, that's, I just live my life by faith. And so, especially this project, because it's so close, I mean, I'm like, Lord, I'm trying to tell the story of the chief exorcist for the Vatican. Like, please help. So please help this to go well, to go right, get us the right actor, get us the right studio. So I was praying the entire time. I mean, when I first reached out to Father Amorth to try to get the rights to his 2 memoirs, it was like I think, beginning of 2015 maybe. So it's taken almost 8 years to get the movie from sending an initial email to saying, hey, we'd love to make a movie about this. Can we start the conversation? And then actually getting it into theaters. So in those 8 years, all the ups and downs that happen as you're trying to get a movie. We had a green light right before COVID hit, and then it was like, oh, we're going to go back on the back burner for a little bit while we wait for COVID to get figured out. So it just was kind of an amazing journey. But the entire time I was just always praying and just asking God to sort of lead me to where I was meant to go to next.
Is it a challenge being open about your faith in Hollywood?
I've never found an issue with it, to be honest with you, and I think especially there's been so many successful faith-based films over the last 10, 15 years. I think that when I first started out in Hollywood, it was probably a little bit more difficult, even just not so much in terms of being a faith-based person, but to try to get faith-based projects produced was a lot tougher 20 years ago. Now I think Hollywood is seeing sort of the commercial success you can have with some of these faith-based projects, and there's a lot of studios that have started up their own mini labels at each company trying to produce these things. So it's much more part of the conversation now than it was before.
What do you think it is about the horror genre or films that deal with the supernatural that really flocks people to theaters?
I think because there's a sense of realism there, even though it's a horror movie, and obviously it's contrived and it's fake and it's made up and make believe, or the majority of them. But I think that that fear that you feel when you go in to see a horror movie, is so real, and we all have different fears that we're exploring throughout our life. So I feel like a horror movie is kind of like a nice roller coaster ride to go through your fears in sort of a safe way, and then kind of explore that. So I don't know. I think it's very universal in terms of people wanting to go and be afraid of something that they know is fake or not real, and just go through that experience.
Their technology plays such a big role now in many of the movies we see on the big screen. There's even talk about AI potentially impacting the industry. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just saw a TikTok where they were showing AI editing a video in Final Cut Pro, and I thought, oh no, this is going to get crazy. So yeah, AI is still, I think, such a whole new thing that I'm not sure where it's going to go, and I hope it doesn't end up putting a lot of people out of jobs, because I would hate to see AI editing all of our movies in the future, like I said, from the way that TikTok video was this morning. But yeah, I think that in terms of the technology with with like the streaming and just even the smartphones and the iPads and just all the ways that you have to consume content now, it's really exciting, I think, especially for, like I said, it's created all this additional content, different ways to consume content. And I don't know, I think it's an exciting time as a guy that's always loved film and technology to see kind of the two merging together. You know, studios being able to, you know, release their own movies to streaming is you know, a new concept that didn't exist before, where you always had the theaters as sort of the middleman between the two. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time for everybody in the industry.
We just have about a minute and a half left, but can you share with us a little bit about your company that you have launched?
Sure, yeah, so I produced the movie through my company, Jesus and Mary, and so named it after the two people that have helped me out the most with getting this company going and getting this movie project going. So, but yeah, I wanted to try to honor them with their names, and then also too, Father Remorse says that the one of the most powerful and effective things that you can use to fight demons in exorcism is really just the holy names of Jesus and Mary, that they carry a lot of weight and that it's a big turnoff to the demons, just their own names. So I wanted to name my company after Jesus and Mary to hopefully have them safeguard it and the projects going forward. Well,
Your film has had a lot of success already. Any talk about sequels or spin-offs? Can you share any of that?
So we did, there was an announcement that went out just about a week and a half ago that a sequel is in early development and in the works. So of course we've got the writer's strike going on right now in Hollywood, so everything's kind of shut down for a little bit until the unions and the studios and the WGA can figure that out. But I'm confident they'll be able to do that hopefully here soon, and then we'll all be back to work with all of our favorite writers, and I can't wait to see, you know, what we can put together for the sequel on this one.
Michael Patrick Kaczmarek, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Anthony, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
We now move on to meet a local artist who finds inspiration from nature and landscapes. Producer Christian Valle introduces us to Jerry Hernandez in this segment of Living Here.
I've been doing oil paintings probably like over 28 years now. Yeah, I used to work for the government, and I worked there close to 27 years. And I would just sell paintings here and there. It was mainly like a hobby. After I retired, I decided that I wanted to do this full time. So now I'm painting pretty much almost every other day. The process is I paint with a black canvas, and then what I do is I put a clear coat on my canvas. That's the way I prep my art. And after I do that, I'm able to mix my paint around. And it makes it just easier to blend for me. You know, it makes things run real smooth, and I can add colors to it without it turning into mud. A little bit of white. With these black canvases, they really make the paintings really stand out. Inspirations come from nature. I love being out, doing fishing, hiking, going out, looking at the clouds and sunsets, you know. I see things that normal people don't see. I'm sure other artists see the same thing, but I can see a cloud and I can see right in it, and I can see every little color in those clouds. Go to a mountain, I can picture the mountain with the shades, colors, you know, different things. Water, I love to paint water. And I just love being out there. It's just relaxing, and, you know, it's very, it just makes me feel at ease, you know, so that's where all my inspirations come from. Depending on the size, it can take anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. I paint, and then I'll let it dry, and then I'll add some more details to it, let it dry, add more details. Yeah, it just makes it a lot easier that way. I know a lot of people, they don't have the patience for oil because of the drying time, you know, but in the end results, they're really nice. A lot of my lightning storm paintings, you know, I really get into depth in those. They're really unique. I've always been fascinated with lighting since I was a kid. I used to get my parents' video camera back in the day and record the lightning and just record it, and then hit the pause button and slowly adjust it where the lightning just hits perfectly. And then you get to see the clouds illuminating, you get to see the mountains, everything that you don't see because that lightning hits so fast. The uniqueness of the clouds and everything that I put into it. My current project, I'm doing a series of the Oregon mountains. I've been trying to do different things of the Oregons to let people know that, you know, you need to come look at these beautiful mountains. They're just right here in our backyard. They could come visit me at my studio here, or I have my own website at jaredonthis.art.com. Jared on This Art is my Instagram, and I am on Facebook too, and it's also Jared on This Art. But yes, I'm willing to show anybody my art. Usually it looks better in person than it does on a photo. So if you want to come see the lighting and the magic of my paintings, you're more than welcome to come. Once you start, you know, don't get frustrated on your artwork, you know. You got to continue on and practicing and practicing. The more you practice, the better it'll get. I know in the beginning it gets frustrating because people want to have already work, you know, at an advanced stage, advanced level, and it just doesn't work that way. You know, you got to slowly understand your paints, brushes, how things work, and just keep practicing. You'll get it eventually. Inspiration, you know, go out there, go see what inspires you. You know, whether it be nature, portraits, you know, people, anything. Just go out there, and if you feel inspired by it, paint it.
Thanks for joining us on the program this week. I'm Anthony Moreno. We'll see you next time on Fronteras, the Changing America.